Let's make a simple biped character using abstract anatomy. The core of anything you make as an artist goes back to very traditional abstract art forms. And you can see here, most art books will provide planes and simple primitive shapes to kind of work your way through to the detailed character that has a lot more detail and anatomy and surface detail and wrinkles. So this is the most basic one. And you'll see here the edge loop, or the edge that loops around the form. You got to have at least an edge loop at the knee, at least an edge loop at the elbow, edge loop at the neck, and an edge loop at the torso. So at the very least, the lowest abstract shape, something similar to Legos or Roblox, you need to have edge loops where something's going to bend. So that's a really important thing to remember. You can always subdivide. Every time you subdivide a quad or four-sided shape, it is multiplied by 4 times. And it's easy to add more detail. It's hard to take away detail if you start off too high poly to begin with. So just remember that when you get started. It also makes UV unwrapping much, much easier. You can see here, this is kind of a gingerbread man looking shape. So think of the chocolate Easter bunny or chocolate Christmas character that has the aluminum foil wrapped around it with that's painted. When you take that wrapper off and flatten it out, that is the UV maps. That's how you put 2D textures projected onto 3D shapes. And it also makes selecting the seams where you're going to actually cut and stitch the 2D form of pixels to wrap around the 3D object, which is kind of nice. And you want to hide the seams. You want to usually put them in the back of the character, behind the head, under the armpits, the inside of the thigh. So we'll go through that. And these are some of the resources that you might want to use. So let's get into Maya and making our character. So I have the channel box layer selected here. So channel box again is up here. And so I'm going to hide these guys and I'm going to work in this sample character format here. So if you've made an object, if you've made a cylinder, for instance here, and you want to make a new channel layer for it, click on the object, go over here to the far right side, and that will give you a rollover, which is to create a new layer and add this and assign the selected objects. I don't know why it's flickering on me. That doesn't want to just stay. But that is what I have currently. So the sample character right now are these ones here. So let's go ahead and play around with these. So if you want to make a character very quickly, that's the assignment to begin with. I just want you to make a simple character and go through the process. So you're learning the pipeline. The pipeline is the step-by-step things you need to do in order to make a character in 3D, rig it and animate it, and then we're going to do the fun part here. We're going to load it into Mixamo and give it an animation, which is going to be a ton of fun. Let's see if Mixamo is going to reload my character for me. Once you've uploaded your character, you can add whatever animation you want to the character. There's the fun Roomba. And, making a character that's rigged and animated so quickly is definitely one of the joys of being a 3D artist. So without further ado, let's go ahead and make a character based on the biped recipe that I'm going to give you. So if I go to the tool settings here and I click on the cylinder, you can see that it's making a cylinder automatically for me. So again, if I don't want it to, if I want to have control over the tool, you can go to create polygon primitives to cylinder to the settings box. And whenever you have a settings box available, create polygon primitives cylinder. Remember, we're going to make this character almost completely out of cylinders. You can use a cube for the feet and the hands, and you can use a sphere for the head. But it's really up to you. But anytime you see a settings box available next to a tool and you're new, open that settings box and see what settings are available. So the axis divisions for the body, for the torso, I have at 12. Height subdivisions at 8. That's and a cap divisions of 1. If I go ahead and hit create, there we go. And then remember, Q, select, W, move, E, rotate, R, scale. If I grab the center scale, it scales the whole thing uniformly. If I grab a perpendicular box, that is going to constrain to whatever two axes arms are next to that square. So if I grab it here, it's going to scale it equally on the X and the Z axis. There we go, make it fatter. If I go up here, it's going to scale only on the up and down Y and left to right X. You see, if I do that, it's going to get skewed or oblong. So you just got to be aware of that. So this is going to be my torso. Go ahead and roll that up here. And I didn't need to put that many subdivisions in here, but a good rule of thumb is whenever a quad, that is a face, is going to be greater than a 2-to-1 ratio on the any two dimensions on there, that's probably where you want to start subdividing. So if they get longer, like a 3-to-1 or 4-to-1, like a long sliver or a long piece that's on the surface of your mesh, that's probably where you want to start adding edge loops in there. So this is going to be my torso. So what I'm going to do here is right click, go to object mode. I'm going to bring it up here. If I hit the space bar, that's where I toggle between the 4 viewports. If I hit F, if I hover over the menu, hit F, hover over F and F, that's going to full screen or center screen, whatever object I'm working on. So this is my torso right here. So working with the torso, I have my settings. The channel box up here gives you access. These should all be 0, right? You should be at the center of the world. And let's go ahead and make the arms and legs. So the other pieces we had in here, so if I go create polygon primitive and cylinder, go to the settings box. The settings we had in there were going to be 8-sided cylinder. That's the good power of 2, even number divisible by 2. The height subdivisions, let's go for 4, and cap divisions 1. And I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. And let's see what we got there. Let me get R and scale that up. There we go. So this is my recommendation for a limb, for an arm or a leg, or a finger or a toe. So what you have is you have one edge loop dead center. That's going to be where the knee or the elbow is. And you have one edge loop here. So if I right click and go to edge, and you'll see if I go to my tool, I have the QWERTY keys, right? Move, rotate, and scale. And all of them are set to symmetry here, object X. So if I go to move, it's set to symmetry, object X. If I go to E, it's set to symmetry. And if I go to scale, it is set to symmetry as well. So I want to turn that off. So I'm going to go to my move tool, and I'm going to set that off. And if I go to my other tools, it does that for all 3. So the symmetry settings are for all of your select, move, rotate, and scale settings. Now these tools can be found in several places. Remember, your student version thing is going to be annoying and keep popping up, so just keep that somewhere handy. Let me go ahead and close that. So this should be the basic piece that you want to use. So I'm going to go to my outliner. I'm going to click on the cylinder, and I'm going to double click, and I'm going to say torso. I'm going to grab this one here. And so far right now, let's call this one, since it's already going vertical up and down, let's call this one leg. I'm going to duplicate it. So your duplication is under the edit, duplicate Control D. Remember, write down your shortcut keys because you want to get fast at this stuff. And you will get fast, I promise. It'll just take you a month or 2 to really settle in and make a lot of different things. You get into a groove. So there's a copy and the paste. Could also use those. I like Control D, and that gives me a perfect duplicate. So I hit Control D, that brings it up here, and it automatically assigns it a name. I'm going to double click that, and I'm going to call this arm. And we could even go in here and go torso base. So this is my base torso, leg underscore base, and arm underscore base. So name stuff as you go as much as possible. I'll delete these other ones. I don't need them anymore. And I'm trying to stay clean as I'm working in here. So for this one, for the leg, this is the base. I'm going to bring it over here. And below the knee, down to the foot, you have these edge loops. So you can see, as I mentioned, greater than a 2-to-1 ratio, probably too long. But that's okay for right now because we're just getting started on this. For the arm, if I go to the rotate key, ooh, I was holding the shift key to see what would happen. If I go to rotate and I rotate this here, I can see up here in the channel box, 90 degrees to make it horizontal to the and parallel to the ground. And I'm going to plug that into the torso here, as well as the leg. So I'm going to bring these over to my torso, and I'm just going to scale. I'm not worried about anatomy. Don't worry about anatomy right now. I want you to do the process first. There's the leg. Scale the leg. There we go. Get it fit right in there. And what you'll find is, if you want to connect an 8-sided shape, this is why I have this recipe designed for you guys. The 8-sided shape will connect and fit perfectly into 4 quads. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 quads. Have 1. Let me go to edge mode here for a moment. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let me go to up here to the X-ray mode, so you can see through. So if I were to bring these corners in, this makes an 8-sided shape, which fits perfectly to this octagon, to the 8-sided shape of the cylinder. And that is the secret to organic modeling of using 8-sided shapes for the limbs. You can go to 12, you can go to 16, you can go to 20, keep it divisible by 2. But going more than 8 for the basic shape doesn't make any sense, because once you have the 8-sided shape, you can subdivide it later and add the detail later, but you always have this core low poly shape in which you can move things and make much simpler decisions with the model. So let's go ahead and take these pieces here. Control G, I'm going to group them together so I have their own group. And I'm going to hit Control D, I'm going to replicate that. So there's 2 groups here. So I'll call this one base parts. So what you're building is model kit. Let's go, actually, let me rename. Let's call this model kit body parts. So when you're kit bashing, when you're taking pieces of models and pushing them together, it's nice to have a hand or an arm or a leg that's already done that you can play around with. So let's see if that's going to be on this channel layer. It is not on the channel layer yet. So what I can do is sample character. I can grab everything in the model kits part. So click on that, hold down shift, grab all those pieces, go up here to the channel and create a new layer and also add the selected object. So I'll click on that. And we'll call this model kit underscore body parts underscore 01, something like that. It has to be a different name. You can't name a layer the same as an object in your outliner. So go there, and now I can hide it. And you'll see here I have group 2. If I move group 2 over and I turn this back on again, there you go. You'll see those are actually 2 different pieces that are identical at the time being, at least. So let's hide the original body parts, and let's go to group 2, and we'll call this our first biped. And right now it is not a part of any of the layers within the channel layer, so I'm going to go ahead and grab all of these. So I'll click on the group, hold down shift, grab all the pieces underneath, make another layer, layer 1, double click it, and this is going to be first biped. Oh, yes. The object by the name first biped already is. See that first biped? So yes, you cannot do that. So sometimes I'll go underscore lay for layer, and there's a reason for that, but we won't get into that right now. But now I can hide and unhide that. And we can also go to that group here, and if I grab just the group node, all the children, or do you see the indentation there underneath it? And it's been moved over by -57. That's to the left of the z-axis, left to right in the front view here. So let me just click on that, type in 0 and hit enter. So you want to be at the 0, 0, 0 world space. You want to be able to mirror the parts over and make your character symmetrical. And what we're going to do is very quickly create a biped, and then we're going to hop over to Mixamo, and we're going to upload the character in Mixamo, and it's going to allow you to make a character, rig it and animate it right away, and see how it moves and functions based on the design that you have for that character. All right, so let's go ahead and isolate this. So right up here, the button is isolate selection. So if I isolate selection, I can turn it on and off. And I do have different layers hidden, but isolate selection lets you isolate everything else regardless of layers and just work on that one thing. Whenever you're working on limbs for these things, you want to right click, go to faces, grab the faces and delete the ends of these because we're going to attach these to the torso. You don't want these faces inside the body of where the arm is going to intersect with the torso. Those faces can get left inside and this can cause trouble. So, whoops. Yeah, if you're in object mode and isolate, that is different than if you're in component mode, right click and go to faces. If I go to face here and isolate, it can just isolate just the component, just the face. So just be aware which mode you're in. So right click face object mode, go to isolate. And when I'm selecting things, a good shortcut when you're first learning is to marquee drag outside the object more than you need. So I want to grab just these faces at the end rather than hit Q on the keyboard. Rather than clicking on this, and then if you want to add your selection, Control takes away, Control plus Shift adds. If clicking on them one at a time like this, that's going to really add your click count on your hand. So if I click off of that, you could just marquee drag across, grab more than you need, go to X-ray mode, and you can see it will do the back faces, and it'll get the things behind it. But then I just hold Control and swipe away, marquee drag away what I don't need, and then hit Delete. So again, let me turn off the X-ray mode. When you're trying to grab faces on an object, rather than clicking them one at a time, or edges or vertices, whatever, grab what you need, more than what you need, and then hold on Control to take away, and then take away what you don't need. Save you a lot of time. I see a lot of beginners going click, 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 and oh my God, it's like watching water droplets on a faucet. It's super slow to work that way. Okay, so this is the arm. And so if I right click and go to edge, so an edge loop, if I go to this edge here and I double click, it's going to automatically, if we go to X-ray, it automatically grabs the edge that goes all the way and loops around that form. So again, I'm going to click off that, hit that edge right here, double click, and all the contiguous edges that connect around that form are clicked. Those are edge loops. So edge loop topology, edge loop theory is really important to be a good 3D modeler. So if I do this one, double click, it's going to go all the way to the edge, but it stops here when it comes to a throughway intersection or open face. It can't continue around the backside because it stops right here at the throughway intersection. So double click, it goes all the way around. Double click, it goes all the way till it stops. An edge ring, if I click this one, are parallel to each, or usually parallel-ish to each other. So I click on this one, hold on Control Shift, double click, and it's going to get all of the other edges perpendicular to it. But again, it stops at the open. So that's an edge loop. And click on this one, Control Shift to add, double click, and that's an edge ring. The edges ring around the shape without hitting each other. So edge loops and edge rings, super important. Put them in your notes. You want to be really cognizant of that. So this is the wrist here. So I'm just going to use my select, move, rotate, and scale keys, my QWERTY QWER keys. So right now I'm in scale, grab the middle, and I can scale that down at the wrist. Go up here to the forearm, scale that down a little bit to the elbow, maybe scale that down a little bit, and at the bicep, scale it down. Oops, make sure I double click, of course, and scale it down. So that's your arm. Right, simple shape, no anatomy, nothing fancy on there. Right click, go to object mode, get out of isolation mode. You just made an arm. Woohoo! Super simple, right? All right, let's go over here and do the same thing with the leg. So go over here, isolate selection, right click, go to faces, marquee drag across, get more than I need, Control, take away, delete. Same thing at the bottom where the ankle is going to go into the feet, marquee drag across, it grabs all those faces, hold Control, take away, and delete. Okay, there we go. This is the knee, this is the calf. So we can make the, if I go to edge mode, go to the ankle, double click, scale it down a bit, switch to W to move, bring it up to the calf, and scale it in, and the knee, scale it in, and the thigh. And super simple shape, nothing fancy. Right click, go to object mode, go out of isolation mode. We now have an arm, 8-sided cylinder, 1, 2, 3, and the way they count the segments is 4. Basically has 4 rows of faces that are edge rings going around there. Okay, so for the foot And for the hand, we could just use a cube. And there's a couple different ways to do cubes. And for the torso, we can use a sphere for the head. So let's see how that works. But first, before we do that, let's go to this one right here. And let's do some scaling on this just to make the torso look a little tiny bit more like an actual torso. All right, so before I do it, let's get the arm, W, move it over just a little bit. And I think the leg we can leave there. There we go. So right click, go to edges, and Alt left mouse, get around here. And always get to a good angle in 3D. Try not to work at really funky, weird angles where you can't quite see where you're at, or you might be grabbing things you don't want to. Always go to a comfortable view angle and make sure that, that's the power of digital 3D. In the real world, you got to get up on a ladder, you got to lift things up and move them. But in digital, you can at will kind of zoom. And again, Alt right mouse button lets you do this really slow pan. Alt left mouse button lets you orbit around. Alt right mouse button lets you kind of slow pan in, and then Alt middle mouse lets you kind of move and pan that around. So I'm switching between middle mouse and right mouse button, getting really comfortable in how I do this. And we're just about ready. We could add a little foot on here, we add a little hand and a head, and we could load this thing into Mixamo and rig and animate it. So let's see how that works. So let's make this torso shape a little bit more bipedal or human-like. So up around the neck area up here is probably going to be a bit smaller, right? So if I go to edge, double click, and it loops right around just fine, doesn't it? All right, hit R, scale, grab the center cube, scale it down. W, push that down just a little bit. And yeah, so it's grabbing this edge, it's going to leave a little sharp point there. So just right click, go to vertex mode. And that'll just be something you figure out for yourself when to switch from edges, from faces to vertices. And it's part of the fun of 3D modeling. And after I do that, I could grab this arm and I'm going to put the arm into the socket here and I'm just going to bring it down just a little bit like that. Go back here to edge, double click, R scale, a little more, and we'll do the let's do the stomach here, in the middle of the abdomen. So I'm going to scale these in just a little bit and then go to the move tool. I'm going to push those forward just a little bit. And you have a shape of the body. And, before I do too much worrying, I don't want you to worry about anatomy at all. I'm just kind of making a basic shape that's going to be like a jelly bean kind of shape. Just doing a tiny bit of work on this before we get too much farther. So I'm going to move this over here and move, and remember, Control plus Shift as your selection, bring that back here. And I want to make the armpit here work for the arm. So in order to do that, I'm going to go to vertex mode, grab these two vertices, or grab the 4 vertices around here, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to switch to scale to R. And go to this perpendicular one right here. That's going to be the Y and the X. And I bring them in. And you see what that does is it makes it a kind of a roundish shape to kind of match the arm so it connects nicely. It's not perfect, of course. Control Shift, go to just the bottom and bring that around. Go to just the top and bring that down just a little bit. Okay, and you see I didn't have symmetry turned on. I only do one side. That's fine. I'm just going to do the one side for now. We'll go to the faces, 1, 2, and switch to Q so I don't accidentally move it, 3 and 4. Remember, 4 quads make an 8-sided shape. I hit delete. Now this arm should match in perfectly to the torso where the armpit is. And while I'm at it, I'll bring the edges down here, just so they're not too out of sync with each other. Let's grab these two. And let's just make them kind of even with each other across the front. And I'll grab the one under the rib cage down here. Bring that up a little bit. And I'm just worried about this side. If it makes you feel more comfortable, go to faces and just marquee drag across the side here. Make sure you look at both sides, top and bottom, and just delete that side. And that way you're not kind of worried about one side being equal to the other, because we're just going to mirror that and make it. And again, beautiful part about 3D digital as you can just replicate and mirror things at will, much unlike the real world. You have to use calipers and rulers and really make things equal. So let's go over here to the leg. So same thing for the leg. We want to have 4 quads that allow the leg to connect to the hip here. So in order for this to work properly, I went to the top of the edge loop of the leg, double clicked, and the leg really kind of connects. I brought my base male human biped in here. And you'll see that the thigh kind of goes up past the groin to the top of the pelvic girdle right here. It makes like a little curve around the top of it. And so really the pivot's up here, but there's like a diagonal that goes across here. Same thing in the backside for the gluteus maximus and the gluteus medius, which is up here. So I'm going to go to the leg that we made. Remember, it's just an 8-sided cylinder that has subdivisions of 3. Double click that top. Remember, we deleted the cap faces, so it's nice and empty. And I'm just going to bring that down a little bit here so that we can have an easier time connecting that, because connecting it into the crotch region is a little bit more difficult than the armpit region. And that's probably the hardest connector you have outside of doing the detailed face when you're doing your first biped character. So let's go ahead and connect this. So I'm going to switch to object mode, and I'm going to grab the torso for a moment, and I'm going to isolate the torso. So whenever you have a cube or a cylinder, and the tops of the cylinder have these little triangular pie wedges, one of the disciplines you want to have as a good 3D modeler is working in organic models in all quads so that everything's 4-sided. So by using powers of 2, what we can do is we can go to the bottom of this, right click, go to edges, and I can get rid of, and I'm holding Control plus Shift to get rid of all these little triangular pie wedges. So if you hit delete, it's going to leave behind the vertex that was right here in the middle. Because remember, that vertex, there was edges going from that vertex to these other ones. But if I undo that, if I hit Control and Backspace, it's going to get rid of these edges plus any vertices that would have been needed to make those edges happen. So I hit Control Backspace, and you see now that vertex is gone as well as the edges. So Control Backspace is what you want to remember when you're deleting these triangle pieces. So if I'm looking at this face here now, one big face. Remember, everything needs to be 4-sided. This one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-sided shape, right? But we know since it's divisible by 2, this is a 12-sided cylinder. What we can do is we could go to the modeling toolkit, which is right up here. It's the very first icon, the very top right corner. And we can use what's called the multi-cut tool. So these have really the main tools. It's just a tiny subset. Most of your tools, if I go to mesh tools, there's all these tools here. There's about 20 of them there. And edit mesh, there's about 30 or 40 exceptions here. But right here is a nice little subset. You also have access to that menu. If I hold down Shift and right click, it goes to, you see, multi-cut, poke face, wedge face, face normals, whoops, extrude face, and all these other options. So that's Shift right click to go to the modeling interface. But I'm just going to use the modeling toolkit for everybody to get started with. And if I go to multi-cut, you see it'll automatically kind of snap to the vertices. It'll also snap to an edge. If I go from a vertex to an edge and I want to go to the middle of it, I hold down Shift. That'll center it. So let's cut this in half. So if I go here, click one time with the multi-cut tool and go to the middle over here, hold down Shift, automatically center, click one time, and hit Enter. I've now cut it into 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 5-sided shapes. And let's go across the other way now. So going here from the corner vertex, click one time, hold down Shift, go to the middle, let go of Shift, go to the end. If as the tool's getting completed, if I need to wheel around using Alt left mouse button, I can move the model before I finish the tool. Click one time and hit Enter. We now have, go to face mode and Q to select so that it gets out of the tool. 1, 2, 3, 4 quads, 4 4-sided shapes. Beautiful. What this allows us to do, this allows us to connect the leg to these 2 quads right? So 1, 2. Let me go to edges. 1. Gonna go to Q so I don't accidentally move. If you have W, if you have move, rotate or scale on, you can accidentally push things around. So Q is your safety net. So if I go edge 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right now I have 6 sides on there. So that actually, oh yeah, we need to cut across one more, I think. Let's see here. Yeah, so we want to punch that leg into the pelvis region here. So we do need to have a little bit more information going across there. So let me take a moment to make sure I give you the correct formula for this. Okay, so much like we did for the arm, we're preparing an 8-sided shape for the connection point. So 8-sided cylinders are the heart of organic modeling for characters and creatures. That includes mammals, quadrupeds, reptiles, insects, you name it. An 8-sided limb is really the way to go. So what we need to do is we need to turn this into an 8-sided shape that goes inside here. So what I'm going to do is go to edge mode again and go to multi-cut again and hold down shift, go to the middle, and I'm going to click here one time, go across one time, hit enter, and then do the same thing for the back side. Hold down shift, click one time, go across to the middle one time, enter. And now we have created an 8-sided cylinder shape. So I'm going to go to my vertex, switch to W. That finishes the tool and switches over to the move tool. And I'm going to bring this over. And what we're doing is we are making the groin region for where the leg's going to connect. And you'll see this happen as we go here. So now we have one. If I go to edge mode, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-sided shape. And we've created the crutch for the biped, which is the hardest part outside of the detail of the face to get right when you're first making your biped. So let's see how this works. Right click, go to face, grab those 2 faces, same as the armpit, delete. And now we can form this into a round shape. If I go out of isolation mode, I can now move this and rotate it to match the circumference of the roundness of the leg here that we might need. So I have a little cheat here. I have this little guy on the side. That's just to kind of keep me grounded here, what I'm doing. So let's see how we can work with this torso so that we can see both sides at the same time.